Ukraine waited for Russia's air defenses to overload. Then, it shattered St. Petersburg's shield in under 9 seconds. At 4:17, the northern approaches of St. Petersburg lay quiet under a misty dawn. Its skyline was mirrored across the Neva River. Without warning, more than 70 Ukrainian drones roared in from hidden bases across the Baltic. They converged on the city from multiple directions. This was no simple raid. It was a multi-domain strike against Russia's second capital. The assault threatened command posts, airfields, and supply lines stretching hundreds of miles north. In seconds, the calm shattered. A lesson in modern warfare was about to begin. Before we dive into this battle, let us know where you are watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you will be the first to get the latest war updates. If you watched our previous video on how Ukraine struck the Russian ammo depot, you already know the pattern. Every time Moscow tries to rebuild its stockpiles, Ukraine hits the next link in the chain even harder. Today's attack proves that pattern all over again. The first wave hit like a sudden storm. As the drone swarm crossed the outer limits of St. Petersburg's airspace, their engines buzzed like an approaching hive. Some flew barely 50 feet above the waters of the Gulf of Finland. They skimmed the surface so low that Russian radar struggled to lock onto them. Others came in from the east at higher altitudes, forcing defenders to split their attention. Within moments, Russia's early warning radars flared to life.
New contact.
Operators shouted bearings, and the first Pantsir S-1 batteries unleashed rapid bursts of cannon fire. Tracers lit up the dawn, streaking across the mist. Yet the sheer number of targets quickly overwhelmed the system. Screens cluttered with blips and alarms blared. For every drone that went down, several more pressed forward. Then came the deception strike. From far beyond the city, Kh-59 cruise missiles streaked in at nearly 600 miles per hour. They were not the main killers, only decoys designed to soak up Russia's expensive interceptors. As SAMs and autocannons tore into these false targets, the real threat slipped through. Suicide drones, guided by satellite links and pre-programmed waypoints, darted past the chaos. They surged deeper into the city's defenses. The storm was only beginning. Above the Neva, the calm sky turned into a battlefield of fire, smoke, and metal. St. Petersburg's defenders realized the night was far from over. The drone swarm had barely cleared the skies when Ukraine unleashed the next phase. With Russian radar blinded and Pantsir crews firing wildly at decoys, a pair of MiG-29s swept in. They held steady at medium altitude, nearly 15,000 feet. Each jet carried guided rockets costing roughly $200,000 per load. These were programmed to strike deep inside the city's southern industrial belt. As they crossed the outskirts, the pilots dipped low and locked onto a massive fuel storage complex.
Miami Center,
They fired in rapid succession. The first detonations erupted like earthquakes. Columns of flame burst from ruptured tanks, spewing black smoke thousands of feet into the air. Shockwaves rolled across the district, slamming into warehouses and rattling windows miles away. Before the fireballs began to settle, the second part of the plan came alive. From more than 40 miles out, modified HIMARS launchers fired precision rockets. Each rocket, worth nearly $150,000, headed toward a sprawling ammunition depot near the port. The munitions streaked across the sky like burning comets before slamming into their targets. A chain reaction followed immediately. Artillery shells, small arms crates, and fuel drums erupted in waves. The harbor lit up as if dawn had arrived early. Cranes toppled and shipping containers flew apart. The port district became a grid of fire and collapsing metal. The Russian command scrambled for a response. Su-35 interceptors clawed upward from a nearby airfield, afterburners roaring as they raced toward the intruding MiG-29s. But the moment they ascended, the trap snapped shut. Along the border, Ukrainian electronic warfare vehicles activated full-power jamming systems. These systems cost just a few $1,000,000, but could blind radars worth tens of millions. Inside the Su-35 cockpits, radar screens flickered to snow. Target locks dropped, and communication channels dissolved into white noise. The Russian pilots, momentarily blind, overshot their intercept path. Seizing the opening, a third MiG-29, flying nap of the earth, at barely 200 feet, rose behind them. It fired a burst from its cannon, forcing the Russian jets into evasive dives. Above the city, the sky turned into a chaotic duel of missiles and failing sensors. With every passing minute, the tactical imbalance grew sharper. Russia's most expensive defenses were being outmaneuvered by weapons costing a fraction of their price. As the last HIMARS impacts rippled across the harbor, it became clear the real storm had only just begun. If you think this was the peak of the battle, wait until you see what happened next. In the next video, the fight moves to the ground, and the collapse of the city's defenses begins. The skies above St. Petersburg were still glowing when the next phase unfolded. While defenders scrambled to contain the chaos, a quieter but equally deadly force moved from the north. Under the cover of thick forests across the Karelian border, Ukrainian special operations teams advanced. They moved on foot and in light vehicles, guided by drone reconnaissance. These UAVs, equipped with infrared cameras, painted real-time targets onto handheld screens. They marked enemy positions with pinpoint accuracy. By the time Russian units realized what was happening, the raiders were already inside the perimeter. Their first objective was to dismantle the city's air defense network. Just outside the northern suburbs stood a critical radar station feeding data to S-400 batteries. Approaching through low ground, the commandos placed shape charges at the base of the mast. Seconds later, an explosion shattered the silence. The massive antenna toppled like a felled tree. Screens across Russian command centers went dark. Operators who relied on those feeds to track threats were suddenly blinded. Simultaneously, Ukrainian electronic warfare trucks powered up along the frontier. Their high-gain antennas pulsed the air with powerful jamming waves. Suddenly, the vaunted S-400 systems found themselves blind and deaf. Fire control radars lost lock, and communication links flickered out. In the chaos, Ukrainian jets and drones roamed with newfound freedom. They were no longer under threat from Russia's most advanced defenses. Meanwhile, ground teams pressed deeper. A supply convoy attempting to reinforce the city's garrison was ambushed on a narrow highway. Explosive charges disabled the lead and tail vehicles, trapping the column.
Who authorized this shutdown?
Small arms fire and portable anti-tank rockets tore through the stalled trucks. In less than 15 minutes, St. Petersburg's main northern supply route was cut. For Russian commanders, the nightmare multiplied. With depots burning in the south and radars collapsing in the north, coordination disintegrated. Orders were delayed and reinforcements were misrouted. For Ukraine, the raid was about precision and timing. They used small mobile units to strike at the arteries of the city's defenses. By the end of the third phase, the shield was fractured and the defenders were confused. The path was opening for the most dangerous stage yet. Russian commanders had no choice but to lash back. Long-range artillery batteries positioned 20 miles outside the city opened fire. Shells whistled overhead and slammed into suspected Ukrainian staging areas. Simultaneously, air defense units were ordered to blanket the skies with missiles and cannon fire. They created what looked like a wall of steel above the city. But the defense found itself chasing ghosts. Ukraine had anticipated the counterstrike, sending waves of decoy UAVs. Some drones were little more than modified commercial frames, with heat flares, yet they served their purpose perfectly. Russian radars lit up with false targets. Missile crews wasted interceptors, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, on cheap drones. Through those gaps, the real strike force slipped in. A pair of MiG-29s, hugging the radar blind spots, swept low across the shoreline. At barely 300 feet, they launched precision munitions into a major supply depot near the harbor. The rockets struck in rapid succession, tearing into warehouses of ammunition and fuel. The result was catastrophic. Secondary blasts followed, each more violent than the last. Within seconds, an entire block of the port ignited. Flames leapt stories high as stored ordnance detonated in a chain reaction. Dockside cranes collapsed and shipping containers were hurled across the yards. Witnesses described the harbor as a volcano spitting fire and steel. For the Russian defenders, the counterstrike had backfired. Their guns had emptied against phantoms, while real targets were destroyed. For Ukraine, it was another orchestrated act. Bleed the enemy's strength, then exploit the opening. By sunrise, St. Petersburg's port was unrecognizable. The battle had entered a new phase where chaos reigned. Please like if you enjoyed this video. Comment 1 to support Ukraine, 2 if you love peace, and 3 if you do not like this news. The inferno at the harbor had barely stopped echoing when the final strike began. A fresh wave of suicide drones, each costing less than $100,000, raced toward the northern outskirts. Flying just above the treetops, they bypassed local radar and locked onto a fuel installation. At 5:42, the first drone plunged into a massive fuel tank. The detonation was instant. A roaring sphere of orange fire rose nearly 3,000 feet into the sky. The shockwave rolled across neighborhoods, shaking windows and steel beams. 5 more drones struck in rapid succession. The entire complex turned into a single continent of flames. The heat was so intense it ignited parked vehicles half a block away. Within minutes, the fire jumped to a military vehicle yard. Dozens of armored carriers began to cook off in violent bursts. Turrets launched into the air and metal hulls warped under the inferno. The effect was catastrophic. The detonations cascaded like rolling thunder across St. Petersburg. Residents said it sounded as if the northern district had turned into an artillery battery. Columns of smoke rose miles into the air, visible far beyond the city limits. Russian firefighters were driven back by secondary blasts. The inferno consumed everything: steel, concrete, and fuel. This strike was designed to shatter more than just infrastructure. It crippled Russia's logistical heart and severed its fuel lifeline. It sent a message that no fortress was safe from low-cost, high-precision warfare. As the firestorm raged, one thing became unmistakably clear. The battle for St. Petersburg had reached its deadly crescendo. The northern skyline was still ablaze when the human toll came into view. Families poured into the streets as secondary explosions echoed like thunder. The once orderly avenues turned into corridors of panic.
We have to pull back now.
Fire engines and ambulances fought through the haze. Yet amid the chaos, an unexpected sight emerged. Ukrainian special forces shifted roles from attackers to rescuers. Operators carried civilians from damaged buildings and guided the elderly to safety. They even treated wounded Russian soldiers who had been abandoned. Medics patched burns and stabilized injuries with total urgency. The message was clear. This was a fight to end aggression, not a war of annihilation. As dawn broke, the outcome was undeniable. Ukraine had crippled the defenses of Russia's second capital. The illusion of an untouchable shield was shattered. Moscow now faced the reality that no city was beyond reach. Amid the destruction, the sight of Ukrainian soldiers aiding captives told a different story. This was a fight for dignity. Above the skyline, a Ukrainian flag waved atop a smoldering radar tower. It remained a symbol etched in fire and resolve.